No, that's true actually. Maybe we should take the beer and the wine after the tea drink. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the British Chamber of Commerce in Thailand, I'm delighted to welcome our guest speaker, Chris Cracknell. Last time I introduced him a few years ago, I got his name wrong, and I can't remember what I said, nor can he, but I got that right anyway. Prior to joining Grant Thornton in Thailand as chairman, Chris was the Chief Executive Officer, the CEO of OCS Group, known in Thailand as PCS. He spent 39 years with the company. He doesn't look that old, actually. And he was appointed the CEO in 1996. He spent a considerable amount of time in Thailand and in Asia, and in 2015, under his leadership, OCS's strong overseas performance was recognised with the Queen's Award for Enterprise in International Trade. Maybe he should be running the project that we have. His proven experience in strategic, financial and commercial management, and he serves as a non-executive director and advisor to several businesses within Asia. He was appointed an honorary advisor to the British Chamber of Commerce quite recently. I was going to read out what it says here, but it says at the end of the presentation, offer a note of thanks. So I'm not going to read that now. So please welcome Chris Cracknell.
Good afternoon, and good luck to all those people that are standing for election today as you sit through lunch, nervously waiting to see how many votes you've accumulated. For those that are successful, all the best for the year ahead, and for those who have not been successful, please have a go next year as well. Just a warm-up just coming in. Greg sent me a message, sent myself a message, and good friend Steve Goldsby a message a few weeks ago, and he said, would the two of you mind speaking at the BCCT AGM? It'll just be 5 or 10 minutes each, take a few questions, and that's it. Well, unfortunately, Steve is in the UK, he's a director of Tesco's in the UK, he's in the UK at the Tesco's board, so he couldn't accept. I had done by that time. So Greg said, don't worry, just do a little bit longer, maybe 15, 20 minutes. I said, fine, okay, I'll do that. He said, no need to prepare too much. Great. Then I see the agenda and the invitation that comes out. It says 45 minutes of me speaking, followed by 15 minutes of Q&A. Thank you, wherever you are. In good course, a disclaimer at the beginning, before I say anything, before you invest your millions in my analysis of what's going to happen over the next 12 months and slightly longer. One word really describes what we have ahead of us. Uncertainty. Our markets do not like uncertainty. Stock markets, foreign exchange markets do not like uncertainty. And that is what we are seeing at the moment. And this follows what has been 24 months of relatively good and stable trading. Very good economies around the world, on balance, not all of them, on balance, have actually performed quite well over the last 24 months. And yet, as we look into 2019, the pessimists are starting off the forecast by saying 2019 is going to be a recession and disaster. I'm not going to go quite that far. I think really what we're looking at is slowdown, and probably a bit of balancing or a little bit of easing off of the good period of the last 2 years. Some of the factors that are causing this uncertainty, some obvious ones that we're all aware of. I mean, obviously the Trump thing. Trump's way of governing in the USA, the way he projects himself, the way he communicates, the sort of messages he sends, and his style of leadership. And it's quite interesting to actually watch how his style of leadership is creeping into the commercial sector, with CEOs starting to model themselves on his style of leadership. Personally, I'm not sure that's necessarily a good thing, whether you're pro-Trump or anti-Trump. I'll leave that to you. it is having an unsettling effect and drawing America much more into an introverted way of looking at themselves. Not sure his policies will last longer term, but certainly they're popular with a certain group of people. The shutdown of the US government, longest period ever, again uncertainty that's coming in from that. I can't avoid the subject of Brexit, and I have no idea which side of the fence you might sit on this one. But what we've seen with Brexit is after a relative period of thinking and whatever, sudden immediate action by Parliament following the referendum. And we suddenly find ourselves with no clear view as to what the future is going to look like. And a lot is being blamed on Brexit. I think our government has found, the British government has found it particularly difficult to find a solution and answer. Because when the referendum was put out and the British people voted, they weren't voting for something specific in terms of a solution, just whether we were going to be in or out. And that has just opened the door on Pandora's box, and the solution is going to be very difficult to find. Government at the moment in the last few months has been sending out pretty confusing messages about where we're heading and their own positions on things. And it is again difficult to see where common ground is going to be found. But it's not all down to the UK in terms of solving what might happen or might not happen with Brexit. Europe also has to stand up and be accountable. And I think if we look into Europe into 2019, it's not all rosy there either. Our friends in Germany have got real issues. Merkel is really seeing her time to a transition period. They've got real immigration issues. Their manufacturing in the last few months, some of the indicators coming out, are actually showing a real downturn in Germany itself, which has been the powerhouse of the European business model, the powerhouse of the cash and the cash that keeps Europe alive. And if Germany falters, then the whole of Europe will stumble with it. Our friends in France, at the moment, we have rioting most weekends. And I think, again, whilst Macron has tried very hard to place himself on the world stage to deflect from what's going on within France itself, he's actually lost that battle probably in the last few weeks. The issues in France are enormous. And they've got a lot of homebred challenges which they don't seem to have solutions. There's quite an interesting factor. There's someone suggested to me the other day. We've had really good, strong asset growth. So people own houses, stocks, etc. Over the recent past, let's go back 10, 15 years, that's 10 years, have seen pretty good growth in their assets. So the rich are effectively getting richer, and that includes the middle class. But at the bottom end of the scale, those that live off their wages each week, each month, that do not have houses or other property, their wages with low inflation have only moved forward a very small amount. So the gap is widening between those that have and those that do not have. And I think what we're hearing coming through governments in Europe and elsewhere around the world is a suggestion that those that are on weekly, monthly wages with no assets are moving more towards, should we say, I exaggerate the word, but some communistic thinking about how they wish to see the future. And thus this divide is causing great unease across a number of countries in the world today. And there is no easy answer to that either. Middle East, we know about some tensions there. The trade wars, USA and China, although there may be some indications of that easing, or there may be some ground being given by the US in the short term, it still had a major impact, and it's not off the table in terms of being disruptive. High levels of corporate debt are also providing quite a bit of uncertainty within the global markets right at this time. Corporate debt has crept back up again. If things slow down, then the ratios don't work so well, the banks get concerned, we might have one or two go under. I'm not advocating that we're going to go into huge decline and a great depression or anything from this. I just think there's a bit of rocky road ahead. and a slowdown in China, which again has actually been one of the major powerhouses behind the global economy in recent years. So a quick spin through the globe. South America. I think as businesses look at it from around the world, it's probably a relatively risky place to invest in. Issues within Argentina. Actually, Brazil's looking a little bit better at the moment, and optimistic for the year ahead. Issues around corruption, some degree of protectionism there. It's come off the boil in terms of a favoured place of investment in the last few years. It's got some potential upside there. North America, Trump, protectionism going in. I think the US economy is probably going to just carry on where it is, ease off a little bit. US dollar will probably ease off in the second half of 2019, and interest rates peak over there in mid-year. Coming into Africa. Now, Africa's an interesting one. When you start to go through, South Africa at the bottom is a little bit out of the African market. South Africa, I see, the currency will continue to weaken. It's a great place to go to, but socially and economically within South Africa, some of the issues they're dealing with and some of the solutions they're putting in place do not make it attractive for people to move to or for businesses to grow. If you go north and go up through the rest of Africa, very strong Chinese influence. Very much into metals, natural resources. Chinese have gone in great policy. They've gone in very quietly. They've invested. They've put their own people in there. But they haven't suddenly gone and said, we're going to do it all the Chinese way and we're taking over. They've quietly, over a number of years, really improved their foothold in Africa. And if Africa does, and it will take off, I think the Chinese are very strongly positioned to take very good advantage of that. Africa, I think, is one to watch. You've got your local issues, you've got your local tensions. It may be a little early for mass investment, but perhaps longer term, something might come out. Europe, mess. We're all in there, we've all had companies, we've all been there. It is, obviously, it's going to be a very difficult period for Europe, and so many things need to be resolved to get the stability back into Europe as a trading bloc, whether the UK is in that or out of it. Russia, personally wouldn't go near it with a barge pole. I think huge issues there about predicting where the future is. There are a number of companies doing very well there, just wouldn't be my choice of places to go. The Russian economy is easing and going down a little bit. Middle East, lots of hope in the past over the Middle East. There was certainly 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. We were all seeing the Middle East as somewhere to go and invest. We've got Saudi Arabia building new cities. We've got Saudi Arabia looking to modernise the way it's thinking. And then we get little instances like journalists being murdered and things like that, which sort of sets back Saudi Arabia in terms of its movement onto the world stage. From a personal point of view, I'm optimistic about the Middle East, but it's not without risk, and I'm not sure it's going to be on terms that we in the West would necessarily want it. But still an interesting place to go with potential, eased off a little bit, probably more to open up and a bit more positiveness in the near future. China, slow down, issues with some of their cities, issues with the way the labour is organised and structured. But China, whatever you might want to criticise the moment, has actually, with its 5-year and 10-year plans and its form of government, actually provided quite a strong base for forward momentum. I don't know how many years we've been deciding about an extra runway at Heathrow. Count how many airports are being built in China, count how many power stations are being built in China, how many road and rail links are being built in China, and we still can't get a runway into our biggest city. Japan, stability, up and down, always low growth rates, a little bit of easing around the labour market. They actually have allowed a slightly higher percentage of foreign labour going in, primarily to deal with their aging population and no one to look after them. And we'll pick on that trend a little bit later. Southeast Asia, I think we are in the best position around the world for the next 3, 4, 5 years. This is the place where the most opportunity exists. I'm not just saying that because I'm here or we're here in this room. It is my belief that this is the place that offers the most opportunity in the short term and medium term. Those in Australia and New Zealand, my dear New Zealand friend on the table I was sitting at lunch, I think they're going to stay relatively strong and do quite well. I think the problem with Australia and New Zealand is that their economies, actually on a global scale, are quite small, and they're a little bit at the end of the railway line, and it works against them. Nothing against great places to visit. I think great, stable economies, but they're just not going to be big enough to influence the world stage. Australia has some particular challenges, just showing the sort of China influence around the world. They sold their largest port in Darwin in the north to the Chinese. Of course, it is also their largest naval base in the north of Australia, covering all areas north. And now every time they move ships in and out to do anything, the Chinese are actually sitting right next to the ships as they come in and out and understand. And there's been a bit of a backlash about such policies of selling key assets over to foreign governments. Farming is very heavily influenced now, and minerals are very heavily influenced by the Chinese in Australia. So let's go back on. I'm going to say this. We live in a time, and it's very easy to sort of think, this is dreadful, the whole world's falling apart, we're so unlucky, it was so much better in my parents' times. It's absolutely wrong, it's not. We are fortunate enough to actually be living in very good times. Global poverty is statistically absolutely falling. There are less wars going on, certainly less big wars, and we've had the longest period of time without a major conflict. I know we've had some conflict, but nothing on the scale of our 2 world wars. Global terrorism is down, and has been for the past few years. People are living longer, and health is generally improving. We can all expect to live that little bit longer. I think 2 key points come out of this in terms of developing opportunities for business today. Old age care around the world. Here in Thailand, the concept of old age care in terms of nursing homes, aged care homes, etc., doesn't really exist. The amount that are here is very, very few. If we look forward, there is a growing need for people to satisfy those sorts of markets. If we emulate what's happened in Japan, it's proven up there already. Health is generally better. And I think, again, in terms of growing markets, healthcare, feminine healthcare, and old age healthcare are all huge, big growth areas for the future. Interestingly, the number of animals that was predicted to be extinct by this year, that has not come about. It's not quite as bad out there, so obviously the efforts to keep them alive are doing better. And global education around the world is actually better statistically now than it's ever been. And that includes girls around the world being educated almost within about 1.5 to 2 years of the same average age of boys around the world being educated. The gap used to be significantly larger previously, and the age of education is getting higher. So I think, we're not living in dreadful times. We've actually got a number of really good things going on. Numbers. Don't take the specific numbers as gospel or whatever. I think the way to read these numbers is to look at trends. So what I'm predicting is global economic growth, 3.3, 2.9, 2.5. So it's slowing down, but it's not coming to a full stop. It's only slowing down. And I think growth is going to occur in different places around the world. Little comments about USA, Euro, China slowing from 6.6 to 6.2. Well, in Europe, we'd be absolutely thrilled if we could get anything above 3% or 2%. China's still up there at a reasonable rate. It just isn't the same levels we had before. It shows that the economy has moved forward and where it is now. My comments over interest rates and US dollar. Interest rates, last increase will be about mid-year, and I then see the US dollar starting to just weaken a little bit, not hugely, but weaken a bit. Global inflation is also at 2.9%. In some of the developed economies, I saw some recent figures on the UK, inflation is actually falling at the moment. So inflation is pretty much under control. It's not rampant. In 1 or 2 countries it might be, Argentina, but generally I think it's okay. So what's going to fill the gap of some of the traditional powerhouses? India is the big bet. I left India out deliberately on the early bit. I think India is frankly moving to take up a lot of the strain around the global economy. Great business opportunities, growing middle class, and I'll talk about middle class in a bit. The middle class is what has driven much of our economic growth over the last 10 years, where countries that did not have really a large middle class is now getting a significant middle class. Around the world, Middle East will take a little bit. Africa, as I said, I think we'll see some opportunity of growth coming out there. South America, I'm going back here. Brazil, if you can stomach some of the things that go on there, I think has a good opportunity to invest in. Argentina is actually looking to have a better year, and optimism within Argentina is well up. Venezuela and one or two others that may not be quite so good, but I think South America's got something behind it. Southeast Asia, certainly emerging markets will take up quite a bit of the strain. And well, as I said before, Australia, New Zealand being steady players on the field. GT released yesterday its optimism forecast. It's just talking to a lot of people around the world. Are they more optimistic or less optimistic? And this is some of the stats that came out. Global optimism is down. It's down quite a bit, 54 to 39%. Optimism in the EU, 28 down to 18, less than 18. And outlook on emerging APAC is incredibly positive. Actually, if you ask the same question about APAC, it wasn't so good. But emerging APAC is really good. And I think that's the impact of China on those figures. Generally, I think ASEAN countries are trading pretty well amongst themselves at this time. What's this going to mean for us here in Thailand? Growing middle class. Same as India, which the middle class is fueling the growth in India. Same is very much true here in Thailand. The middle class is fueling consumption of consumer products, and generally people are having cars now, owning apartments and things like that. So fairly positive. I think someone quoted the other day, 22-23% of all the population of Thailand is now living in Bangkok. So it's quite a skew into one city, and that's where predominantly the middle class is all gathered to. Been unaffected, Thailand, by the sort of emerging country downturn of Turkey, South Africa, Brazil last year. The banking system here is held up as pretty robust. It seems to be working. The metrics on the banks seem to be holding together. The currency is there. Okay, pretty stable, better than it certainly was 10 or 15 years back. Again, from my perspective, Thailand has a huge opportunity to play a much bigger role in the leadership of ASEAN, certainly on its neighbouring countries. Labour in Thailand, similar value per hour as China. Much more expensive than India. But the surrounding countries' labour rates are a lot cheaper, but some of the infrastructure is missing from them, and some of them are much more difficult to trade in than Thailand. If we take a shift in the world power, moving from the US to, frankly, an India-China axis for the future, the third option will be Southeast Asia, and Thailand could play a lead role in that. In terms of opportunity, I think if you're investing as a foreign business into India, it might on the surface look quite easy. The reality of operating once you were there is actually quite challenging. Same exists for China, in losing your IP or other stuff straight away. But actually coming into Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand and around here, you can get good workforce, you've got good communication, and I think this area could provide a viable alternative to China and India if it gets its act together. Thailand itself, though, is not all a bed of roses, as you all well know. The election, we now have a date, the 24th of March, when that is going to happen. I have a slight concern over the residential housing market here, supply outstripping demand, and that's without even factoring in the demand from China for buying property and stuff here. I still think there's a potential risk that there's too much on supply at the moment. Labour is expensive in relative terms. However, the key area for me, and much more of a concern, is around productivity. I think productivity here is too low generally across the board, not just in factories, in offices and everything. Productivity is generally too low still, and part of the underlying issue around that is education and language skills that Thailand has got to address how it is educating its kids at school, basic school, through into university and then into the workplace. And I think it's an issue which many people have talked about, but there is no solution. If we don't make change, no change will happen in that area, and it could hold Thailand back. Level of personal borrowings, actually corporate debt here is relatively low. Personal debt is quite high. If there is a falter in the economy, then personal debt is generally sitting with the middle classes. They're the ones who are going to get caught, not the very rich who are, frankly, pretty immune from anything that's going on. Infrastructure, I'm going to say, is under pressure. Now, you're going to turn around and say, look, we're extending the BTS lines, we're building new roads and whatever, we're putting trains down the eastern seaboard. Yes, that is all going on. But unless there is a focus on keeping existing, already built infrastructure, such as the BTS just outside of here, up to date with more trains running on it, you know, when buildings, areas like Bangkok 1 come on, how are workforces going to move in and out of the city and be drawn in? So for me, it's not that we haven't got infrastructure, but we've got to make sure the infrastructure that's currently in place keeps pace with the business development within the city. Moving now and taking a slightly different tack. Having sat as a CEO and whatever, it's great to blame the economy for all of our sins and problems when we don't perform, and it's always the economy that is letting us down. I think, as business leaders, there is actually a bigger threat than the economy in 2019 if you want to be a successful business. And that is the way we do business, and the tools we have to operate our businesses are changing dramatically. The biggest and obvious one, robotics and artificial intelligence. Most of our business leaders, or people my age, and no, appreciate a lot of you are much younger than me as business leaders, our understanding of the use of technology in providing solutions is, in general, quite limited. And we're the people leading businesses making decisions. The solutions that are now available through technology that will impact our businesses, these established businesses, are wide and varied and very well understood by a younger generation. The threat for us in this room as an older generation is startup businesses and new enterprises that come in and disrupt existing marketplaces. Large companies, multinationals, love stability. They like to be able to forecast where the economy is going. They like to know what their share prices are like to be if they perform, not because the market or the economy has gone up significantly or down significantly. New startups just see disruption in the economy, this unsettled period, this uncertainty, as opportunity to come in with new solutions to old problems. So, yes, the economy may slow. I think this is a much bigger risk in 2019. Those organisations that don't embrace it will fall behind. And those that do embrace it will have an opportunity. And our threat isn't probably our competitors of today, it is the startups and disruptors underneath. At the bottom, data analytics. All organisations, we're just talking on our table over lunch. The amount of data your computers and your ERP systems in your businesses can throw out today is enormous. You go out there and you say to your technology developers, oh, we want this piece of technology. And you go to a startup, what do you want? And they give you a list of about 30, 40, 50 different things they want. And the developer says, yes, we can do that. And off they go and develop it. And poor old management, senior management, is now getting a ton of data it doesn't really understand, and it can't translate into answers. My one piece of advice for this group and for this lunch. Information is great when it's accurate and understanding. I believe businesses should be focusing on 5 or 6 principal markers of how their business is doing and some sub-markers that sit underneath it. If we make it overcomplicated, we won't be able to run our businesses and we'll lose control of them. Get your basics right around those markers, and I think you increase your chance of success in the forthcoming years. The danger is, we're told we've got all this information, these wonderful graphs. We look at them, we don't always understand how the algorithms are written, and we interpret that data and we make bad decisions on bad data output. It may be accurate because we didn't understand that data when we made the decision. Data analysts, really short supply here in Thailand and generally in short supply around the world. If you don't have data analysts, you can't take this big data and make it into something understandable. If you've got children looking for careers, I'm guessing data analytics is probably something that's going to be a pretty big business over the next future. This came out of the NIA, a couple of quick slides just to finish on and close on. These were some of the trends that this is National Innovation Agency here in Thailand, some of the things they're focusing on. They're actually global trends just being lifted into this from international sources. Ones that interest me, insect protein as a food source. I think there is some real potential there with the challenges around agriculture. Plant-based food is a rapidly growing market, another one you might want to look at and consider. And then coming back here into really health on the bottom right-hand corner, the healthcare market, whether it's feminine health, old age health, or whatever, again, a huge potential in a growing market. All of these will in some way be influenced by artificial intelligence, robotics, and other things. Things will not be done the way they were in the past. I'm not, by the way, a pessimist over robotics. I think the worst jobs will be done by robots, but actually the workforce that is displaced by robotics will be required elsewhere. My template for that is the Industrial Revolution in the UK. Actually, it saw more jobs created than it saw destroyed in total. I think robotics is a part solution, it is not a total solution for people. So I think these are some of the interesting areas coming up. The top right is probably hope that people are going to feel morally obliged to do things right if legislation isn't there. One other area, again, this is AI. All the indicators just reinforce that AI is a critical solution to business going forward. If you're not thinking about it, embrace it, do some research on it and see. And it isn't just AI is great for huge businesses. AI is great for these businesses, not mine. Actually, AI works within all businesses at all levels. So my summation in terms of running a business in 2019 going through to be successful, the businesses that are successful will focus on their core activity. They will fundamentally outsource anything that is non-core. The old era of a business doing everything, its accounts, its everything, will not exist. Go over to the US, East Coast, West Coast, sorry. Have a look. Businesses there, they have a board of directors, they own their intellectual property, they do their R&D, and that is just about it. They own their customers with that. Everything else is outsourced. You are spending, most businesses here, globally, are spending huge amounts of time distracted by dealing with internal issues about trying to run their businesses, when they should be focused on the external, the strategy, and driving the businesses forward. And I would estimate that it's at least 50% of people's time is being wasted with the old model. The successful model in the future will see people doing what they do best, building their products, innovating, taking it to the next generation, looking after clients. We used to do cleaning in-house. We then outsourced it because it wasn't core. The same now applies to doing accounts and other stuff. They are add-on things that are draining your resources in your organizations. They can be put out for competitive bid and made to happen. Outsource what is not core, focus on what you need to do, use technology to drive your business and make it happen. So, If the rate of change on the outside exceeds the rate of change on the inside, the conclusion is pretty obvious. The end is near. So the outside world is changing to make sure your businesses are changing quickly to match that. They're the ones that are going to survive. In conclusion, yep, uncertainty. But it is not a disaster. It's not all sort of tearing up everything and running away from it. It's actually just a slowdown. Probably a slightly greater risk of recession in 2020, but I don't believe it's going to be a recession. It's just a greater risk. It's just a slowdown. Will go for about 2 years. And other economies are going to pick up some of that gap. Just it won't be traditional ones. Opportunity will favour the agile. And that's the last bit I was concluding on those last few slides. Businesses, if you think, no, I'm going to stick to my model, I'm only going to do this, I'm going to repeat it every year, I think you will be outpaced by either disruptors or by your competition coming in and undermining you. The world power base will shift, if it hasn't already shifted. India, China, increasingly more dominant. Does Thailand want to play a role within Southeast Asia to bring that forward? And please, in closing, just don't assume because it worked in the past, it will work in the future. I think the evidence is strongly saying now that that will not be the case. So, that is my quick... Okay, that is my presentation this afternoon. I hope you found that of some interest. It was rather a speed run through what is happening around the globe, but please, there is plenty of opportunity for business people that want to make things happen. And I know most of you in this room are here because you want to make things happen in your companies. So good luck on that. I'm very happy to take a few questions if there are any.
Yep.
Richard, sorry. Go on, Richard, you go first.
Thank you very much, Chris. I'm Richard Thornton from the British Embassy. You've spoken very eloquently about what business is going to need to focus on, the way in which they need to change the way in which they operate in terms of outsourcing. What is it the government needs to do to change to support businesses to make that change?
Well, I think from a government perspective, start at the high level. Government and countries tend to look at their boundaries and national boundaries as key issues for them. That's my territory, that's the bit I govern, and that's where I set my rules. Businesses, especially international businesses, do not see the globe in the same shape as the territorial maps that we're very used to of different countries. And so at the first level, I think governments have to do more to understand how they're going to deal with tax for international trading, businesses that trade online from one country that sell goods in another country. There's a huge amount of change going to happen in government there. Rather than trying to prevent and hold on to the past, I think totally fresh thinking is required on structuring things like tax regimes for international trading. Around people, people mobility and people management. Government has, in addition to all its responsibilities, a social responsibility to those that live within that country. And there is a need to try and create an environment where wealth, I believe, is better spread and more equally spread and more opportunity provided underneath. I do not think business alone is going to solve that problem, so government is going to have to pick it up. Is it going to be easy? Absolutely not. And the answer is not taxing the rich more. There has to be other tools available to make that happen. So government, I think, has got to shift its thinking from old models. It's got to embrace technology in the same way that businesses have got to embrace it, modern ways of thinking. Thailand in particular, I think the government's departments that are out there need to rapidly use technology, even the ones that have taken on technology in, say, customs. Whenever you want to move something in and out of this country, you still need reams and reams of paper to do that. So we need to actually say we're going to have technology and deliver it, use it, and then I think they've got to do something around keeping the wage gap at an acceptable level to allow maybe the farming group or whatever, not to be totally disenfranchised while the rest of the country is enjoying wealth. Otherwise, I think we'll have some of the disruption we've got in France at the moment. There's part of the answer there, Richard.
Chris Roman, Data Consult. One question I'd like to raise is that of the progress of ethical leadership in the world, something you haven't really referred to. Maybe there's economic progress, maybe there's even some political progress, but what we're seeing is an absolute liar in the United States, a very disruptive woman who doesn't listen to anybody in the UK, something of a crook in Russia, a murder in Saudi Arabia, an election in the Congo where it seems to be an absolute fraud. Hopefully that's not going to be the case in Thailand, but I'm worried about who might be an ethical leader here. Where do you see the progress of ethical leadership, of integrity in the world? Because it seems to me that if we had a graph of integrity, it would be definitely downward moving in the years that are going by, and hopefully not in the future. But are we really making any progress in that respect?
Christopher, thank you. Excellent question. Ethics. Business today, big business, does have a huge responsibility in how it sets its minds of its employees. And I tend to agree that we have too many examples around the world where the ethical stance of either a government or individuals is perhaps not what we would wish to see. But I'm perhaps not so sure it's been any better at any time in the past. We in the West pride ourselves on certain behaviours and certain ways of acting. And they're not culturally always mirrored around the world. And the ambitions are not necessarily seen as being the same elsewhere in the world. If you have a country which is effectively very poor and the people are struggling for education and other stuff, then things like damaging the environment are going to come very low on your list of priorities. This is going to be an ongoing issue of battle that will only be won over time if I believe, or when I do believe, wealth is better distributed around the globe. I'm not sure we're going to see what you aspire to see in this global marketplace in our lifetimes. And we'll see some movement, we'll hear some good stories. Global warming, yes, there may be some progress there. The move into electric vehicles, yes, that may be beneficial. But a lot of the underlying true exploitation stories, whether it's in Russia or elsewhere around the world, I think we're set to continue hearing them. I don't believe there are enough people lined up on the right side of what I would perceive to be good ethics, as opposed to those on the other side. And until that changes, I don't see the world changing, but that shouldn't stop us striving for a better environment, for a fairer world, and more equality.
Dan Hales, Cataclean Global. With, I guess, global awareness now of Malaysia and the issues there politically and obviously the knock-on economically and the change of power there, do you see that having a knock-on effect here in Thailand and more broadly across Southeast Asia with lack of confidence in the political structure there now and investment there, etc.? Or do you think it's going to settle now that the new power is in control?
As far as Malaysia is concerned, and these are my own observations rather than anything that's to be quoted on, please, I think the new government in Malaysia, in the longer term, speaking to colleagues down there, will actually probably be better for Malaysia. In terms of, is it going to poison the rest, or is the rest of Southeast Asia going to be tainted by it? No, I don't believe so. I actually think it presents a good opportunity for Thailand. I think it's more positive for the rest of the region. Malaysia was trying to attract more business in, international investment, etc. I think that will falter as a result of this. And I think the alternatives are Thailand and surrounding countries. So if there has to be winners, Thailand and Southeast Asia.
I thought if it redirect towards us, I wasn't so much thinking of the poisoning element, I was thinking
the investment will definitely move more this way. No more questions I can escape.
Well, you can't quite. I would like to say thank you on your behalf to Chris, and I know that you would like to say thank you to him as well for what I consider to be an extremely insightful and yet understandable analysis, I suppose, for want of a better word, of the global situation. I know that when you read newspapers, as I do, the Times, for example, every day, it's full of the focus on the UK's own special interests at the moment, the Brexit situation. But there is life beyond Brexit, whichever way it goes, as you said earlier on. And I think one of the things that we've got to take into account, both here in Thailand, in Europe, in the UK, is that the world is changing, that it's revolving and evolving, and that at some point in the future, people are going to look back, just as I do now, and remember the days when I didn't have a mobile phone, when I didn't even have a phone. And when fax machines were something wonderful, these new inventions that actually enabled you to stick a letter in and send it through the phone lines. Not many of you will remember those days, but some of you will. Just imagine in 50 years' time, it's going to be a similar situation for some of the young people now. They'll look back and say, mobile phones? What were they, for heaven's sake? Because they won't need them. They'll have other methods and other ways to connect. So, Chris, thank you very, very much on behalf of everybody here. Please, a big round of applause for Chris. On behalf of British Chamber, I'd like to present you with this very large pen.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, I declare the annual general meeting reopened. One item of business, I have to announce the successful candidates for the board. But before I do, I'd like to say thank you to all 12 of them, whether they were successful or whether they weren't, for showing their interest in